So I've had this board set up for days. I set this up right after the draft lottery, basically, to talk about the draft and how important it is to draft first. So, is it important to draft early? Yeah, it is. Is it important to draft first? Depends on the draft. Now, this year, 2020, Alexis Lafreniere, we don't know where he's going. Why am I wearing Oilers? Because this is a Taylor Hall jersey, obviously from before he got traded to New Jersey. I picked this up the summer after he got traded on the Lids website for for about $50, because it was original 150, and then he got traded, and all of a sudden people didn't want a Taylor Hall jersey in Edmonton anymore. So I went all the way back to 99. I thought, well, how far back do I want to go? So I went with 99. The number one pick that year, Atlanta picks Patrick Stefan. First thing that stands out, it's Atlanta. They're no longer there. Stefan, known for missing a net as a Dallas Star. The number 2 and 3 picks were the Sedin twins that year, so Vancouver walks away as the winners, the best players in the draft. And they were picking at 2 and 3. In the year 2000, New York Islanders pick up Rick DiPietro. That's the number 1 draft pick there. And at 3, Minnesota picks up Marian Gaborik. There were some guys who were in and around that area, but I wanted to keep this simple. I didn't want to completely clutter up this side of the board where I've got like 8 or 9 different players who you might consider to be necessarily in the same realm or similar. But we don't get a check mark until 2001, where Atlanta drafts Ilya Kovalchuk. And Kovalchuk was seen as a huge talent, thus the red dot. So I put a red dot next to the ones that before they hit the NHL, they were considered to be pretty amazing talents and guys who might be able to save franchises, this type. So Ilya Kovalchuk, check mark, was the best, but at number 2, Ottawa drafts Jason Spezza. He's had a pretty good career himself. So yes, Kovalchuk was the best one from that draft class, but Ottawa's consolation prize not too bad. 2002, Columbus drafted Rick Nash. I do consider Rick Nash to have been the best player in that draft class, but at 54, Chicago drafts Duncan Keith. Now, Keith, very likely to be a Hall of Famer, so does Keith end up emerging as the guy who should have been considered the best player from that draft class. I kind of went back and forth, and I thought, nah, I'll put a check mark next to Nash, and we'll let people in the comment section decide on where you think the best player was. 2003, Pittsburgh drafts Marc-Andre Fleury. This was an insanely deep draft. The reason that Patrice Bergeron is on the board is because he was numbered 45 in that draft. Number 45. And honestly, while you could argue whether he is or isn't the best talent out of that draft, it was an amazingly deep draft. And this year's draft is seen as a very deep draft as well. Not necessarily 2003 in terms of its depth, but not too far off from what I've been reading. 2004, Ovechkin. You'll notice the red dot. You'll notice the check mark because I cannot argue Ovechkin's not the best player in that draft class. But Pittsburgh at 2 got a pretty good player in Evgeny Malkin. And of course, Malkin has had a pretty solid career with 3 Stanley Cup rings. Ovechkin may very well be the all-time goal-scoring leader in the NHL when his career's done. He has a Stanley Cup ring to his name as well, and he's not done collecting those yet if you ask him. So 2005, Pittsburgh wins the draft lottery, and they get Sidney Crosby, who we all knew what he was going to be. And the interesting thing, of course, was Crosby, that was after the lockout, wiped out an entire season, so you get Ovechkin and Crosby in the same draft class. They're tied to each other right there. Number 11 that year wasn't too shabby with Anze Kopitar going to LA. And the LA Kings have won a couple of Stanley Cups. So again, that's the number 11 draft pick in 2005. And I'm not going to try to argue Kopitar's better than Crosby, but the Kings built a pretty darn solid team with Kopitar as one of the main guys. 2006, St. Louis drafts Eric Johnson at number 1. No check mark for him, as I feel Taves at 3, Claude Giroux at 22, Nicholas Backstrom at 4. You can make an argument for any of those 3 players as having been the best of that draft class. There are others you could argue as well. The 2006 draft was pretty darn good. And Eric Johnson, while he's had a good career, not the best player in that draft. 2007, Chicago picks up Patrick Kane, and there was a lot of hype around Kane before that draft. There really was. So red dot and a check mark. But Dallas drafts smartly at number 129, and they pick up Jamie Benn. So again, when we're talking about the draft, it is really easy to focus in on what happens with the lottery, and we all get upset at that time. But on draft day, this is where GMs and scouts really earn their money. The scouts bring all the information in, and it is often the GM, not always the GM, that makes the decision. Sometimes he allows the scouts to make the decision on who to take when. But that decision is made on draft day, and sometimes you get a steal like Jamie Bennett, 129th overall in the draft. 2008, Steven Stamkos is drafted first. I'm not going to try to argue he doesn't deserve that, so I'm going to put a check mark there. But Erik Karlsson was drafted at 15, and Roman Josi of the Nashville Predators drafted at 38. Interestingly enough, on the day that I'm recording this, let's see, that's $8.5 million, another $10 million, $18 million, $29 million in bonuses got paid out on July 1st to those three players. So they're pretty happy. And yeah, a pretty good draft class. And again, drafting at 15 and at 38, Ottawa and Nashville get good players. 2009, the New York Islanders get John Tavares. And Tavares was seen as a guy worth tanking for and worth tearing things apart for. And Tavares, I will say, the best out of his draft class. But at number 2, Tampa Bay gets Victor Hedman. And if drafting at number 1 right now, would the Islanders have rather picked Hedman or Tavares? I don't know. You'd have to ask them. And I don't know what the answer to that necessarily is. Again, I'll say Tavares, sure, best in the draft class. But Hedman, pretty solid defenseman overall. Maybe the best defenseman in the league. 2010, of course, Taylor Hall, the guy on this jersey, is drafted at 1. Tyler Seguin was picked up at 2. And we can still have that debate all these years later on who's been better throughout their career between Taylor or Tyler. That was the question going into the 2010 draft. 2011, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins drafted by the Oilers, the second out of 3 in a row. And number 58 that year was Tampa's, and that's Nikita Kucherov. So remember, if you're a Detroit fan and you're upset, Yzerman has a history of drafting pretty solid players outside the first round and even late in the draft as well. So Kucherov at 58, I like RNH, but yeah, I'd probably take Kucherov ahead of him. 2012, Nail Yakupov was picked by the Edmonton Oilers first overall. So the Oilers, three first-round draft picks, or 3 number 1 draft picks in a row, I should say. Only one of them is still with the Oilers. For Taylor Hall, they got Adam Larson, and for Yakupov, not as much. So getting those number 1 draft picks, it doesn't matter a whole lot if you don't have a plan afterwards. Number 11 that year, Washington picked Philip Forsberg, and Carolina got Jacob Slavin at number 120. Who, if there was a Langway Award this year, he would definitely be one of the top 3 or 4 defensemen for that award. In my eyes, anyways. And so, yeah, the 2012 draft, one of those chaotic drafts where the number 1 draft pick wasn't necessarily a big hit. And I also want to make mention as well that your number 1 draft pick now is pretty much certain to be a pretty darn good player. You've got Stefan here, who, of course, was a flop. Johnson's had a good career, not necessarily number 1 overall worth, but Yakupov flopped at the NHL level, but it's rare. 2013, Nathan McKinnon was picked by Colorado. He is the best player in that draft class, so the check mark. But Florida picking at 2 got Barkov. Barkov's a pretty excellent player as well. No, he's not underrated, because we all say he's underrated. So if we all agree you're underrated, you're not underrated anymore. Underrated is Huberdeau. 2014, the Florida Panthers drafting first get Aaron Ekblad. But the Oilers drafted Draisaitl at 3, and Pastrnak goes to the Boston Bruins at 25. So again, Ekblad, pretty solid defenseman. I like Ekblad, but am I going to try to argue him over Draisaitl and Pastrnak? No, I don't think anybody will. 2015, Connor McDavid, of course, the biggest hype around him that we had seen for anybody since Crosby. And he's lived up to it. Buffalo taking it 2, they took Jack Eichel. Eichel, while Buffalo hasn't got a lot better since he got there, Eichel is an amazing talent. No, he's not available on the trade block. I understand people wait for a trade because he's frustrated with losing and they think, well, maybe Buffalo would be crazy to trade him. 2016, Austin Matthews also had a lot of hype. And the check mark because he's been the best from his draft class. But don't rule out the number 2 pick that year, Patrick Laine. Laine this year took the next step in that he started playing a better all-around game. He became a much better player. So while there were Laine supporters who said, see, he's getting ice time, and that's why he's better this year, I would counter with, well, he changed his game to get better this year. He understood that just complaining for ice time wasn't good enough. He needed to go out and show that he'd earned it. He needed to make sure that Paul Maurice couldn't put him on the bench and put him on the second or third line. He did that very, very well this year. Next year, he'll be able to get, I think, the goals back up to where they should be. He should be a 50-goal scorer. but Matthews is a 50-goal scorer. And Matthews is a guy who could score 600-700 goals in his career. Absolutely. 2017, well, the jury's still out. New Jersey's got Nico Hischier. New Jersey fans have no regrets over getting Nico Hischier. It's still way too early to say who the best was from that draft class. But Elias Pettersson in Vancouver at number 5. Cale Makar at number 4 for the Colorado Avalanche. You could argue them over Hischier. Again, if you're a Devils fan, you're probably going to argue against that idea. But yeah, Hischier has been a very good player. There's still a lot of upside there. But Pettersson and Makar showed that if you lose the draft lottery, which both teams did, it doesn't have to mean that you're not going to get a top prospect. You're not going to get a guy who may save your franchise. As I would say, Pettersson has saved the Canucks attack. He's been fantastic. 2018, Buffalo gets Rasmus Dahlin, who had tons of hype around him before the number 1 draft pick, and was seen at the time as the best all-around defenseman in the NHL, possibly since Denny Potvin. No pressure on you, Mr. Dahlin. So number 2, that draft, Carolina picked Andrei Svechnikov, and of course Brian Burke lost his mind that Carolina got the number 2 draft pick in the draft lottery. Number 4 that year was Ottawa's Brady Tkachuk, and number 7, Vancouver got Quinn Hughes. So again, it's sometimes it's a matter of just making the right pick at the right time, and don't worry about that number 1. Last year, way too early to say who the best is from that draft class. So what I did was instead I said, okay, New Jersey picks Jack Hughes, who I think is going to make a next step next year. I think Capo Caco for the Rangers at number 2. I think he takes a step with his offense. Kirby Dach looked pretty good in Chicago towards the end of the regular season as well. Bowen Byram for Colorado. He should be up next year. And Alex Turcotte up for the Kings next year. So it's way too early to say, but there is no clear-cut best player at this stage out of that draft class. And of course, that brings us to Alexis Lafreniere. Lafreniere, very, very likely that Lafreniere is going to be the best from his draft class. That if I look back on this 2-3 years down the road, I've got a check mark because he's the best in his draft class, and definitely gets the dot for having all that pressure, all of that hype around his entry to the NHL. The reality is, while he may very well be the best player, I have a funny feeling that this draft, as deep as it's purported to be, we may look back and go, yes, whoever drafted Alexis Lafreniere got a star player. But, the real stars of that draft were, maybe it's Montreal with all the picks they have. Maybe it's Ottawa with all the picks they have. And so while you may lose that lottery and we may get all upset about it at the time, and I've been upset about it before, I have. Seeing the Canucks drop in the draft lottery every time out, I'm like, yeah, we didn't win it again. Yay. But even in losing the draft lottery, they got Pettersson and they got Hughes. So it's not the end of the world. It's just a matter of having a GM that picks the right guys in the right spots. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, I'm anxious for the draft, and it's only, let's see, July, August, September, 4 months. Anyways, there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.